now, where people have preconceived notions of what medical cannabis dispensaries or collectives are. Back then, they weren't so stuck on their ways as much as what they've seen in the media. And when soon we identified we weren't going to be similar to what Dennis was doing, because he was running a facility that was very open and flamboyant in San Francisco, there was a lot more open doors. But what we did find, with Rob Raich assisting us in some of our lobbying meetings, is that in the city of Oakland we had a much more prosperous debate, much more of an opportunity to be at the table with these city officials. And through that, we found one of our proponents, Nate Miley, who is now a current board of supervisors in Alameda County, that spearheaded our activity. We went in with a smorgasbord of different reform issues that he could work on, and he picked out medical marijuana as one of the top issues that he felt we could focus on. And in doing so, he didn't know that that's really what we were there to meet with him about anyways. But we soon got leadership from him about who in the local environment in Oakland was supportive, was on the fence, and we focused our time on those that were going to be already on our side to further swing those that were in the middle, and almost did not meet with those that were on our opposition, figuring that the one or two that we knew that were out to get us weren't going to be swung over to our side. So we left them behind. And in doing so, we set up one of the most progressive set of circumstances in the Bay Area for a quick 1-2 on everything that we did legislatively in the city of Oakland. Almost anything that we were proposing got adopted with either unanimous support or with almost no opposition. The leaders locally just didn't vote if they felt like they didn't support it, because they were blindsided with how politically organized we were. We showed up at meetings, as Don said, with our environment, with our community, and they couldn't say that we weren't representing what we were doing. We had people that were visually meeting it. We had people that were being reverent and not just there to politically smoke out on the front steps of City Hall, although that did occur, because there were times where we had to make points that the city government wasn't listening to the needs of our community, but we did so in a very reverent and you could say professional basis. As with a lot of the political actions that we try to do, we try to get people dressed up a little bit. It's not that we're asking you to wear your Sunday clothes as much as that we want you to not be tagging us with the imagery that's been stuck with us since the Nixonian days. Nixon did a very good job of painting us into a picture of anti-war, counterculture, non-motivated folks. And it's up to us to kind of change that imagery as we're remaking what's going on. And the success we found in Oakland is history now. I didn't think, as Don, that 10 years later, after working with the city government in Oakland and setting up some guidelines for possession and safe standards, and working on one of the first programs that was adopted by a city government in the country, that we'd still be talking about this, that we wouldn't have been wiped off the map and something else would have had been placed in our place, because the federal government's powerful. And it seems to me that we were onto something, because we're still sitting here, we're still talking about it. And if we weren't, in my mind, if we didn't have the truth behind us, we wouldn't really be able to be formalized in the fashion that we're in, because the government would have already scraped us off the map and said, no, that doesn't exist. And we've done a very good job of changing the dynamic of what's happened. When I got into this, it was all about the federal law being supreme. And most in this room now know that it's a little different, that there's a state-federal conflict in the way that the law is worded. That didn't exist when we first got involved. We actually affected that. That consciousness shift came from us and our activity of resistance and saying, no, that's not true. All of the government workers that were in the state at the time when the law passed said, oh, the federal law just circumvents this whole thing. There's no legal possession. There's no legal patients. The doctors, they shouldn't even talk about this because they're going to lose their license. And it was a fear tactic campaign that we simply just shrugged off and said, they're not responding to reality. They've got their head in the sand, and it's a different world that we're dealing with. And I think the reality of what we were touting is now commonplace. And, you know, I mean, all truth passes through 3 phases. And in our lobbying effort, we did a lot to change their perceptions. And in some instances, we were violently opposed by law enforcement on almost every turn. What we found very funny at some of the lobbying hearings and things that we attended with the public safety committees and the different government agents, the only opposition that really showed up in the room were law enforcement. Or, as Don points out, local community citizens or groups that are politically connected that were just worried about not understanding what was occurring or having a misconception about this being in their neighborhood. And what I found in the last 5 years is how quickly we've changed from fighting the NIMBY effect, which is the not in my backyard, to being part of it now, and we don't want that in our backyard. We ourselves are saying, no, 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 no more dispensaries here. We worked successfully in LA to place a moratorium in the Los Angeles city government record because there was too many dispensaries popping up that were being unregulated and not having any kind of quality control or support from the community, and they were causing backlash with not only the police, but the local communities. It was almost like fire season, where everything's kindling and you're just ready to try to put out fires, and there was too much work to do. And now it's kind of calmed down a little bit in LA. You've seen less raids. They're trying to get through a process like we did here in the Bay Area, regulation. It's been drawn out a little bit more. But I have to say, when it's completed, it's going to, I think, in a sense, put a nail in the coffin of what the federal government has been lackingly doing, which is enacting on this. And I would have to commend those that are on the stage for actively fighting and being on the front line. I don't necessarily feel that I share completely the risk exposure because of being an ID card representative at the table, working with the local authorities and on a private card. But I think that I'm, in a sense, providing cohesion and stability in the movement to say we need to push it a little bit farther. Because as I started with our lobbying effort, I wanted to create an institution that couldn't get uprooted, that was so deep-rooted in our community that it couldn't be forgotten if somebody came by and just knocked it off its course. And I didn't think that I would be as successful as I was, because I didn't think that after the federal government ruled against us in the Supreme Court decision in May of '01, that we would have a dispensary model that still existed close to 2010. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop. So I just want to put, you know, the seed in your mind that it's our actions here in this room that could affect what we're going to be doing in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, as Don was saying. This could be the model that generations are going to be using. And it kind of scared me at the time when I started our dispensary model in Oakland, because Rob pointed out at a few press conferences and political meetings that this could be the model that all drugs that are not currently regulated or allowed in a societal trend are set up to be monitored and locally tolerated by communities. It's kind of a touching stone to being a little bit bigger than what we are in this room. But there are other types of drugs that are being researched that have therapeutic value that our society doesn't accept. You know, whether you look at it in LSD or in other types of things like MDMA, those are things that other conferences touch in more detail, but our government still has the same stereotypic reaction, which is fear and more or less falsehoods about their effect. So I don't know if there's any things that I didn't touch there, but I'd love to handle some questions when we get to that point.
Before we do questions, I just wanted to clarify one thing real quick and then talk about something I didn't talk about before. One is on the, I want to clarify on the income tax, is we talked about how it's totally separate than the criminal laws against cannabis. So